got so much feedback from your interviews with Zach and Andretti. People loved it. I mean, we got so many messages, and it was awesome. But we're going to have an awesome one next, right?
We're closing things out the right way with a dear old friend, Michael Shank. Michael's way too formal for Ohio's finest son. So we'll just go with Mike. Look at that. Look, a little bit of a flex there, Shank. Look at all the empty champagne bottles.
That's pretty impressive.
Right behind us here. And we have a great view of our brand new shop. We just moved in 2 weeks ago, out behind us here a little bit, and we're busy bees here getting ready to go to Sebring and Daytona next week with our IndyCar and sports car program.
Well, Marshall,
I heard that you just recently moved. You're expanding.
Yeah, we just built this great new 50,000 square foot facility, and we're really proud of it. My wife and I and Jim Meyer made a commitment and built this building for all the people that work here and for ourselves, obviously, and just takes us to a whole nother level here.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Mike. And Marshall, on to you.
Shank. So we kicked this off Monday morning, 7 a.m. my time, with one of your friends and partners, Michael Andretti. And so seems fitting that here we are on Friday, the final day of the race, or in EPARTRADE.com Race Industry Week 2021, with the man who won the Indianapolis 500. Your first win in IndyCar, right? How crazy is that? We're going to get to the racing stuff here in just a moment. We're going to get to you first, actually. But I figured there's a bit of a tradition in your world. When you win, you celebrate. You've become known worldwide for celebrating with what? No, not those champagne bottles over your shoulder. Busch Light. So I figure, what better way to kick off the final day? And I'll tell folks, I searched yesterday 2 different liquor stores and 1 major grocery store to find Busch Light, Northern California. They don't have it. So what could I find? The rot gut of my youth, Mickey's. Mickey's fine malt liquor. So Mike Shank, to you, let's toast morning drinking. Cheers. Let's kick off this interview properly, brother.
There you go. 10 a.m. down the hatch.
7 a.m. And it's just as bad as I remember it. Oh, Lord. And we still have the need for me to have my first Busch Light with you in person. So we'll save that. Let's talk about Michael Shank, race car driver, before we get to team owner and all the things folks today might know you about. For those who are watching, they might not know that you got into this as a young, I'm going to win the Indy 500, I'm going to be the next, you name it, celebrated driver. Tell folks about where racing came into your life and how strapping that helmet on, strapping the car, was actually your first major introduction to what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm love that we're here. I love the PRI show, and of course, doing this around EPARTRADE is awesome. So I'm glad to be here. Racing for me was from day one. You know, when I was a kid, I could identify engine sounds, what kind of engine they were with my mom. She always told me that. And my dad was involved in SCCA club racing in the late 70s and 80s with some local people in Central Ohio. And I always went up to Mid-Ohio, IRP, Nelson Ledges, Road America, Blackhawk, those kind of tracks, and grew up. And I used to beg and plead just to stuff me in the pedals, and I'll clean around the pedals. And we're talking like Fiats and Triumph Spitfires and midgets and stuff like that. And the minute I graduated from high school in the late 80s there, I became a line mechanic at a Mazda dealership in Columbus, and have made just enough money and lived with my mom, and got a loan for my first race car. And it was a Taiga Sports 2000 car, and just completely winged it. Had no idea what I was doing, just knew that I wanted to drive race cars. And really what it stems from is from the Indy 500. You know, growing up the month of May, getting the Indy Star at the club in Columbus, we'd have it shipped over for the month, watching all the news coming out of the Indy, you know, IndyCar for me was always the top rung and what we aspired to driving wise. And so, you know, my dad made $45,000 a year. He died a long time ago, but he did everything he could, my mom and dad, financially, but you're not going to get anywhere on 45 grand with a kid, a family of 5 and trying to go racing. So we found other creative ways to pay for my racing. And mostly of it was all car preparation. So I started a prep shop, Marshall, just like you worked for back at that time in Central Ohio, though, in this area, the Central Division of SCCA, and started prepping cars for business people and drive my car, prep their car. And then slowly that just kept evolving to really where we're at today. And so did my driving. I've learned a lot about driving since then. It turns out that I was only slightly above average at best, looking back on it now, although I thought I was pretty damn badass back then.
Hey, you have an IndyCar start on your resume. I mention this all the time. I was there to see it, and I still blame you for taking out my driver. You didn't really, but that's okay. Yeah, but you did at least get the IndyCar, man.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been that bad.
Well, no. Listen, I'm grateful for every opportunity I had. We drove a lot of cool cars along the way. But it just wasn't for, my brain's not wired for it. I believe the true greats, you think about guys that are coming up now, and even like Dixon and some of these guys, how Elio handles a speedway, they have another gear in their brain to manage information that I just don't have. And I figured that out after I was robbing my wife and of all the money she made outside of racing, and it was time for me to step aside, and we did in the early 2000s, and it worked out pretty good.
Well, I do love that we are starting out with a shout out where it belongs, to the SCCA. You with the Central Division out here, for me with San Francisco region, like you going to tracks as a kid. My father, an amateur race car driver, also prepped some cars. A lot of similarities in our lives, and my first race car that I drove was a Taiga as well. Happened to be a Formula Ford instead of a Sports 2000. But little did we know, very similar timeline. You and I are doing a lot of similar things, except for, well, you're sitting there as an Indy 500 winner, and I'm sitting here tapping away on a stupid keyboard. But let's talk about current. Let's talk about where you are today with a state of relaxation on your face, unlike I've ever seen during the off season. That's because about 6 months ago, you won a little motor race called the Indianapolis 500. Now, you've been asked this a lot, the minute after you won, day after, etc. But maybe 6 months of separation will give us some new insights. How has that win changed your life, your wife and business partners, right? I mean, the Meyer Shank Racing isn't just Michael Shank, it's Mary Shank as well. How has this win changed your life now with about 6 months of perspective? Jim Meyer's life, the team and such. Tell us where you're at, my friend.
Well, we always thought we were good at, we always thought internally here, we're definitely good enough to win this race. But when it actually happens, there's a lot that comes right up in your face, right? And it turns out it's a pretty big deal to win the race. It's the gift that doesn't ever stop giving. It has completely transformed our life in many, many ways, almost all positive. I'm super proud of it. It's something, even though you wear it, you almost wear it as a badge of honor, right? And it never falls off your body. It's pinned and it's always there because people who know of how difficult it is. I do feel like we deserve it insofar as that we've paid our dues. We've been knocked down a million different times, a million different ways. We've had to be very creative and selective how we get here financially. The bottom line is that with this particular win, absolutely would not have happened without Jim Meyer. And I don't mean from a financial standpoint, actually, because I think financially I was scrapping for ways to get there anyways. But the depth that he brought to this team and has brought and continues to bring will never be recorded enough for me.
From a business knowledge standpoint, or relationships, or
all that, everything you just said. But his network is so powerful, and he has helped so many people along his travels in life. Like I feel like I have too a little bit, that they all want to be a part of what he's doing. And so I get to kind of lag on to that. So Liberty Media owns 30% of our team now. And we're really proud that, they won that, Liberty Media owned the Atlanta Braves, so they won the Indy 500 and the World Series this year. And we're super proud that we were able to give all them a ring for our side.
Wow.
We held up our end of the deal, so looking back on it now, without that Indy 500 win, it's a lot different right now. I'll be honest with you. It's a lot better now. And we have some financial stability under us right now, and it allows us also to plan for the future with this Drive for 5 with Elio coming up. In my mind, with Simon and Elio at the 500, we got two of the premier best guys at that speedway in live real time right now. And I think that gives us a unique opportunity for our sponsors, our partners, and our OEM Honda.
Let's talk about ramping up. We're going to come back to the crazy Brazilian and crazy Frenchman you hired and all that kind of fun stuff. We're going to get there in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit of, we're mentioning the Braves, inside baseball. So you start out in 2017. Hey, we finally made it to IndyCar single race, Indy 500. You ramp up to 6 races the following year, 10 after that, full-time after that. Now, 5 years on or so, you're going to be 2 cars full-time in IndyCar. Tell us about the process of ramping up, finding people, right? The folks that were looking after the second car, Elio's car, the 06 Honda last year, those weren't necessarily all full-timers. Tell us about expanding your own team, full-time folks, engineering staff, Andretti Autosport, technical alliance, how you integrate them, engineering group you're going to put around both drivers. Tell us about that, because that's not easy. There aren't a line of folks out the door waiting to be hired. The entire IndyCar paddock is scrambling to hire engineers, mechanics, you name it. Tell us about ramping up.
It's been tricky, and that's a great question. The whole industry, in my opinion, right now, the racing industry, specifically what I know, which is sports cars and Indy cars, is just absolutely booming right now. So it is an employees market right now. Lots of opportunity. So what we try to do and how we stand apart, and it can be counted both ways. We're in Columbus, Ohio. We're not in Indianapolis. We're not in Charlotte. We're one of the very few mid-sized teams that are at the 2 hubs right now that can work for us and against us. It's proving tricky a little bit because we got to get people here or train them up from here, which is the route that we are going actually. So we're trying to find the right people that we think we can train or are trainable with the right work ethic, with the right desire to go racing. We have to get very creative these days to get the proper people in here. Of course, we got to treat them better than everybody else. And I focus every day of my life to try to treat my people better than other people do. Now, we don't always succeed, but it's a real challenge. And that's the number one thing. We have a product. I want to go racing a certain way, Marshall. And this is how I want to go. This is how I see it. Right or wrong, this is how I see it, right? And how many people can I get to buy into that? Which is maybe a little different than the old school way and some similar in other ways, but we want to try to create this. And my competition director on the IndyCar side is a guy named Adam Rovazini. He's in his 30s. He's been with big groups for the last 15, 20 years. And he and I are trying to take the best of all that we've seen and put it that this place and promote that this is a great place to work. Everybody does the same thing. We're all trying to do it, but it's proven very tricky because if our product doesn't stay at this level, meaning engineering, the way we look, the results we get, we will instantly lose all this momentum that we have. So we really emphasize that.
Adam's a good man, a smart man. By the way, that wasn't just a sip to start the show. I'm determined to polish off this 24 ounces of nastiness.
That's worse than this, I guarantee it.
Oh, trust me. In my very early 20s, with about $2 a day to live, it was Mickey's and Fire Cheetos. So a little bit of a callback here for me. Let's talk about the Andretti Autosport relationship, Mike. That's been a powerful one. That's been something that I got to tell you, from the phone calls I receive from team owners wanting to be the next Meyer Shank Racing or Andretti Autosport, Chip Ganassi, and so on. This technical alliance that you have created is one that a lot of other team owners would love to have, whether they're Honda or Chevy with a bigger team to help them step up, become more powerful instantly. Tell me about how this process is coming along as you are now expanding to 2 full-time cars. If we think of it from a satellite standpoint, Andretti has their 4 full-timers, you're going to be adding 2 drivers to that and their engineering meetings and such. Tell us the status of this relationship. Have you also decided who's going to be your engineers for the 06 car and the 60 car next year with Simon and Elio? This is an important thing you're doing, but not many others have been able to find similar deals.
Well, let me just say, in my mind, I think it is the modern way to break into IndyCar racing and have the best opportunity to look the best you possibly can, meaning get results. I really believe that. To go out on your own, these teams have had this car for 10 years, Marshall, more or less. And it's an evolving thing. I get that, but the gains we make now are just tiny. For us to expect that we would parachute into that 8 years in or 7 years in, whenever we came in, and expect to be competitive against them, even with the best driver in the world, is nonsense. It's not possible, right? So we felt like, we started with Schmidt Peterson at the time, right? And we had a good 2 years with them. We were very happy. We were very budget limited during that time. And, but we learned a lot. We set a lot of the way that we do things today was set during that period. We switched over to Andretti, the Andretti group with Michael and those guys, and it's been very good. So we've been 2 years with them. We just signed another 2-year deal. So we're this year in 23 with them going forward. It's been very, very good. Now it's easy to say that when you win the Indy 500 with them, but let's take that to the side for a minute. Just the way that, Rob Edwards kind of runs that thing and shares information with us. Everything they said they would do, they've done, and then some. And it's been awesome. It's been really, really good. That doesn't mean someday we don't do it on our own when it's right, but we think it's the best of both worlds. Now keep in mind, it's 80% MSR people, right? Yep. And even some of our engineers are on the project. They supplement the race engineer, the top level, as part of our deal. But we get the guys that have been with us from them, they feel a part of MSR, and that's what I want them to feel. They are a part of, yes, they're in Andretti's stable, but they're with us when they're with us, and we get complete buy-in from that. Next year is a little different because we're going to have 2 full-time cars with this deal, and that was a negotiating thing that I had to work with Michael and JF and Rob Edwards on, because it's a bandwidth thing too. How much people do we all have, and how can we make this all work? And we came to terms with that, and I'm happy with that. We have new engineers. We have a new engineer. Garrett Mothershead is with Simon, and Mark Bryant will stay with Elio for next year. And both very experienced, both put a lot of time in around the paddock, know the game. But I can tell you for 2 months now, we've been working nonstop in the background, trying to get that process started. And it all begins this coming Monday, when we go to Sebring, and we're going to talk about this. I know we're going to test Nick DeVries. So, but that group, all of my guys are coming for that one car, just to get everybody's, motions moving forward again,
We're going to talk about Nick for sure, Shank, because that is, when I learned about that, I was like, okay, this man is aiming high here.
Yeah, yeah.
Why don't we come back to Nick in just a moment? Why don't we get to the 2 nut jobs that you have full time, at least right now?
Yeah.
Elio, I mean, we know so much about him, right? He's been a part of our universe for decades now. I was fortunate to work with him a long, long time ago. Tell me what he brings, the tangibles, the intangibles that he brings to Meyer Shank Racing, the stuff that, I don't know if I want to say you didn't have before, but now that he's come in, obviously won a fairly important race some folks might have heard of, but what has he brought to you, the tangibles and intangibles to improve Meyer Shank Racing? And I'll ask that about Simon in a moment.
Well, both cut from the same exact cloth, so I could answer one for the other, pretty much. At least my thought on why we did it. And you and I've talked about different shows of yours. We've talked about it. We had to make a choice when we knew we had the deal to run Elio. Do we want to go with youth and inexperience, or less experience, or do we want to go with the guy we think could win the Indy 500 for us? We obviously, and that was the real conversation at the time. Obviously, it worked out and we looked like rock stars, but but it's so much more than that. That's just the experience part is great. And he knows exactly what he wants, especially at the speedway. He knows exactly in what cadence it needs to come in. And if you give him that, then just stand back and just get your pit stops right, because otherwise he's going to be at the front. But it's beyond that. If you just look at how Elio treats people, anybody, how he treats me, my wife, our family, all the folks here and their family, how he interacts with our partners, how his willingness to do whatever it takes on the business side to make sure we accomplish all of our deliverables for our partners. It's next level on Elio. And by the way, Simon's the same way. Just Elio delivers it in a different way, a little more animated. That's all. But they both understand the business side of this is what's keeping us all alive, and it has to be prioritized. And both of them, by the way, you can argue they weren't quite ready to be totally done with this, and so they have a little chip on their shoulder. And I can't. It's hard to buy that. And they want to prove that they deserve to be here still. And we want a part of that. We want to be a part of that.
Let's talk a little bit about Pagenaud, someone who, prior to going to Team Penske, was definitely seen as a future champion when he was with Schmidt Hamilton Motorsports / Schmidt Peterson Motorsports. Went to Penske, didn't necessarily have a great start there, rebounded the second year, won the championship, had some ups and downs, won the Indy 500 in 2019. Bit of a fluctuating time with, in theory, one of the two biggest teams in IndyCar, more resources, more anything, more everything than anybody else. I do love the idea, Mike, of him leaving Penske and going back to a team that isn't as large, can definitely receive more of his experience and insights, maybe have a bigger influence on the overall organization, because at least at Schmidt Peterson, Schmidt Hamilton, that's where we saw the best of him, fully invested in all areas possible. Are you receiving that yet from him? Not a guy who just wants to drive the car and then go home, but get his fingers into every aspect of how to make Meyer Shank Racing better?
Absolutely. At times 10. He is 100% bought in. He is, he's done everything I would expect and more. He's on the ball. He's working with my guys to make sure he gets exactly what he wants out of the car. And that comes from a little Schmidt Peterson, a little Penske, everything he's involved, sitting in this tub and being comfortable, and the pedals he likes and the wheel he likes. We're giving him every single thing he wants. We're also building the relationship between him and Garrett now too, because that's a new product. You know this, but he's been with Ben for 10 years. 10
I know.
Seasons. I mean, this is like a huge marriage, in my opinion.
They had to figure out, who gets silverware, who gets the dog. Obviously, Simon's going to get the dog, but yeah, it's a bit of a unexpected divorce of sorts. Not that there's anything bad that happened between Ben Bretzman and Simon, but they have been together for so long that the idea of him having to start from scratch with a race engineer is a little crazy. But Garrett Mother said, good Lord, you're not going to find a guy in the paddock who other engineers respect more than Garrett. So that's a great move. But to your point, this is a driver who also somewhat like a race engineer, big brain, wants to know everything on the technical side. And here's a race engineer who's worked with everybody from rookies to veterans, won the Indy 500. I love this alignment here too, Mike.
These two guys fit my world, which is, a little bit of the underdog swinging as hard as they can upwards. They're hungry. Even Garrett, Garrett's had a couple of tough, not great seasons, and he wants to be back on top. So I got a drive from the engineers. Mark Bryant's coming back from doing Indy Lights full time to IndyCar when he wants to get in and prove his point. We got a bunch of people that want to be here and that want to prove that they deserve to be here at a high level. And I like those odds for us. Now, you and I can have this conversation in October and see how it ends up. But, when I look back on, we're still talking IndyCar here, obviously. When I look back on our IndyCar season, there's a couple of times this year that MSR, let Jack down. And it crushes me that it happened that way. but you know, we got to learn. We try to learn from those things desperately. And by the way, the new drivers know what our downfalls were this year. You know, we try to, you know, and Elio was part of a couple little issues too that, you know, so we all have to deal with these things that happen in racing that no one can get rid of totally, and how to react and how do we respond to that. And I just feel like we got a bunch of people that want to be here in the right place for what they're at in their life. And, you know, let's see what it brings us. Except
for Matt Swan, but that's always a topic that we can.
Yeah, that's a problem for you, I think. Yeah, that's
a charity hire, but we do appreciate that. Keeps them off the streets. We'll stick with IndyCar for a little bit longer, Mike, and we'll move to IMSA. Spoke about Nick DeVries, reigning Formula E champion. I got to admit, I don't give a fart about that. That kid should be driving for Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren F1. He is a badass.
Yep.
When I learned that he's going to be testing for you compared to about 50 other names I might have heard, I said, Shank is swinging for the fences here. Now, Nick is obligated this coming season to Formula E, one more year there. So he's not available to drive right now. But tell me about the decision here, because I'm not sure how this might be received by your brand new full-time drivers in these two entries, one being Elio, one being Simon, both veterans of the sport, achieved everything. Hey, by the way, we're going to Sebring and we're going to test a young gun who could be coming for your jobs. You're letting a rabid animal into the building that wants to be in one of those cars, I'm sure. Tell me about the mindset behind this test. Is this you trying to look to the future? Is this you putting a little pressure on the two veterans to know that, hey, I'm not just sitting here hoping and waiting. I am looking ahead. Could there be other drivers that you test?
Well, who said I wouldn't run 3 cars?
That's the answer I was trying to get out of you, Shank.
So listen, you pretty much got it though. This move is a preemptive move just to see how we all get along, to see if he, you know, how he gets along. You know, this car, I think Grosjean called it a steering monster or something like that. These things are tough to drive, man. And let's see how that interaction goes between us and him. I could use him on the sports car program potentially. He's an awesome sports car driver too. It's just in general, let's see what he can do. It is of no threat to anybody that's on this team right now driving race cars. And everybody acknowledged that. It didn't even come to my brain, to be honest with you. But we do want to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening and who is coming up the ranks. This test on Monday, Marshall, is turning into this little F2 battle.
I know. I love it.
Well, I just saw the last guy. I just lost his name. I'm sorry, but
Jack Aiken.
Aiken's going to come. So, you know, it's going to be an interesting day and kind of like a mini race, I'm assuming, you know, so look forward to that. But listen, you know, Simon and Elio are pros. They've been down this road a million times, right? And we all got to perform though too at the same time, and they know that.
If you like what you see with Nick, any chance you think later in the year of a third car coming out, maybe after the Formula E season? Are you thinking that far ahead yet, or any possibilities if you want to actually get on track and get a feel?
I see another test potentially for sure, but I don't see a race just from an equipment and his scheduling. You know, he's reserved, you know, he sits right next to Toto Wolff and all the broadcasts. You see him standing there, you know, he's reserved for Lewis and the other car. And he's reserved for Toyota prototype, and he's got a P2 ride in WEC. So he's got a lot going on. But this opens the book. Right now, we can take a look and see how some of these guys react to the IndyCar that come from F2. I was impressed with the guy that Rahal ran at
Lundgaard. Yep.
Yeah, I thought he did a hell of a job considering this car is really difficult, and I can see why they signed him. So, you know, time will tell, but this is the direction we're going, the trajectory we're going.
Let's talk about Liberty Media, Mike. Talk about a surprise, but also impressive alignment with Liberty Media, buying into the team. What role do they play? What do they do for y'all? It's great to have an investor, but money doesn't get you all the way to victories and such. What do they do that folks don't know about? that help you?
They're pretty active actually, and they're incredible people. Well, yes. So first of all, it gives us a very, very sound financial base. It also gives us potential opportunities to their network of things, whatever that may look like. I can't even predict what that would look like, but it does show its head once in a while when I try to help them. They're working on a million different projects in our world, Marshall. It'd blow your mind if you knew them all. Okay. And anywhere I can help them with what they're doing, I try to help them with my network. And it's just, they're in the racing business, they're in the entertainment business, and they're trying to figure out ways to expand that footprint, right? In only the way they know how to do. And it's awesome. And I don't know where that relationship will go ultimately, but I want to be a part of it. I know, and this is part of that thing that Jim Meyer brought to the table was Liberty. And they were all at the 500, including Greg Maffei, who's the president and chairman of the company, and got to ride up the elevator at the 500, which is an awesome experience. And then again, they won the World Series, which was huge for them also.
A couple more inside baseball IndyCar things before we move on to IMSA, Mike. So not so long ago, October, I believe, your team was part of IndyCar's or Firestone's running at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. IndyCar asked your team there with Elio to give some feedback on simulation of the 2023 car, added about 120 pounds of ballast, turned up the boost a bit, wanted to get some feedback. I know that I have spoken to all 4 drivers, 2 at Indy, 2 at Mid-Ohio, that have tested with this ballast and whatnot. They have all said, get us a new car now. We are at a tipping point with weight being way too high, almost sports car level. The vehicular dynamics are wacky with all this extra weight now. Any thoughts there? I know that new hybrid engine package is coming in 2023. IndyCar has said, without giving a definitive date, 24, 2025, maybe a new chassis. Having been part of that test, having heard the feedback from Elio and maybe others, any thoughts? If you could fast track a new chassis, would you push for that, or are you good with the timeline that we have right now?
I'm really torn on this. On one hand, I really appreciate what Jay Fry has done with the spreading out of costs for these chassis and cars. I can't tell you how much it helps the more we use the main car, the spine itself. It just helps financially so much, cars per driver every year, So the economics of it are awesome. I mean, like, it really makes a group like mine, especially starting like when we first started a few years ago, makes sense. And I applaud Jay a million times over, but there is a but. The but is this car weighs nearly 2,000 pounds now in hybrid form. It's 10 or 11, 12 seasons old by the time we get to there. I understand what the drivers are saying, and I think it's going to be time fairly soon that we all take the bullet and get to a car that's optimized for these systems and not scabbed onto. We're rapidly approaching that, Marshall. Now, that's not good news for people thinking about getting an IndyCar right now, because the later they get in, the worse the financial model gets, spreading asset costs over time. For us, we're in it deep enough now. We own 4 chassis, plus we have a pit stop car. It won't be fun. It will be painful, but it's also rapidly approaching the time we must think about doing this. And by the way, one of the great things that Jay Fry does is he allows some costs, and I don't want to get into how it happens, but some costs get spread across a period of time, which also helps teams. It's extremely helpful. And they did that when the DW12 came out, just from Jay. But also I get what the drivers are saying, and having spent, I picked up that multiple chunks of lead that went into our car. I mean, it's 120 pounds, like a body running around in the back end of the car, like a human. And it's heavy. The car's heavy. So listen, we all have the same heavy bullet. The safety stuff that we have, I wouldn't trade a nickel for. I mean, I just would never trade that screen and when we've done that. That has been awesome. But at some point, we got to probably think about it.
By the way, I think you have multiple employees streaming Netflix, Hulu, something at like 4K UHD because they're sapping up all your internet bandwidth here. But that's okay. We still love you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's not your fault. I'm just saying, you know, they see the boss is distracted for an hour, so they're off in the break room streaming everything they can and pulling down the good old internet service here. One or two more things here in IndyCar, Mike. You mentioned costs and value. One of the things I've been discussing, spoke with Michael Andretti about this, Zach Brown earlier this week, and that is value. You own an IndyCar team. What is that worth? Is it a commodity? Is it something you could readily sell, or is it something you could borrow upon? Different than back in the kart era, Champ Kart era, where we had franchises. You actually bought into something that had a known value, a tradable commodity almost. Any thoughts on whether that's a direction for IndyCar to consider, so that whether you want to sell a part of Meyer Shank Racing, an entry among the many entries you have, someone else wants to get in, they know what the buy-in price is, something that makes things a little bit more of being a stakeholder in the series than just kind of an unaffiliated business person with no real definable value to what you have. Any thoughts on how we might turn IndyCar teams into something that, again, are real assets that have a known value?
Listen, I'm 100% for this. I just, and I'm really good friends with Justin Marks, and just to hear what he's gone through buying the Ganassi deal out and the value of franchises over there, charters, they call them over there. Denny Hamlin just admitted to paying $13.5 million for his charter for Kurt Busch's car. I mean, that is unbelievable. That's 4X, 3X of what they started out at. And that's a true model that lots of people can get their head around. So I don't know how, I know that Roger Penske has talked about it. It's in a discussion point. I don't know exactly how it happened, but I can tell you that we would support it. And we like that idea. We have invested millions and millions of dollars here. And theoretically, all we have really are assets here. And that does grow by year. But to have a tangible, as you say, asset as a franchise could change the whole dynamic of IndyCar racing to the good.
Well, as a multi-hundredaire, I harbor a dream of investing into Meyer Shank Racing. So maybe one day I could own 0.01%. I don't know if it becomes Meyer Shank Pruett Racing. It kind of messes up the flow of MSR, but I harbor a dream.
That's all right. I love the idea. I love it. So,
well, let's close on IndyCar on this. You are a man who understands the business side more than I would say almost any of the long-standing team owners. Most of those you're trying to beat to the checkered flag. Billionaires, hundreds of millionaires, been doing this for a long time. None of that's bad, but you and your wife are folks who started with nothing and worked their way up, mortgaged the house multiple times. You feel the business side, and therefore I know you are always giving input to Roger Penske, Jay Fry, and whatnot, how to improve things, how to make things better for you, how to make your business stronger through the decisions IndyCar makes. Had a good season, right? There's been IndyCar on the rise. TV numbers are up a bit. A lot of things feel like they're better, but what's the next step? What's the next, hey, let's work on this to make things better type suggestions you're offering to RP and Jay and whatnot? Because I know you've got your pulse on that at all times.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about my internet connection. It's a new construction here. I'm continually bringing things as much as I can, to my opinion on things and why and how they affect us directly. My thoughts on open dampers and IndyCar, my thoughts on fees and IMSA. I share everything I possibly can with these guys. I think Jay came from where I sit today, Jay Fry. He understands our perspective from an owner standpoint, what's important. That's why he pushes so hard just to not bring new cars in very often. He understands that commitment. He understands cash flow. To me, cash flow is everything. Every month every month matters to me, right? And so how that affects our cash flow. price increases or unknown price increases are a killer in our business, meaning one of the suppliers decide they need to do an increase, which they're allowed to by their contract, but it kind of gets laid on us at the last minute. And, now we have to deal with it post our budgets being done. Okay. Which happens a lot, unfortunately, on both sides of the aisle here. It can happen anyways, but it's a delicate line, Marshall, because a lot of appreciation for what the sanctioning bodies do, but I'm also trying to not lose money. I'm a small business in America, right? And so I have to get my point across, what things help us, what things hurt us. And most of the things everybody knows. They know we're all dealing with the same issues. It's just, they just get in my position and how am I going to do a spread? If I have to update all my cars, how does that affect how am I planning for that? Or fees are going to change, entry fees are going to change. I need to know that a year before they change so I can plan for it. I'm giving examples, so.
Why don't we move to IMSA, my friend, because we could spend at least another hour talking about sports cars. It's a rough first year for you, brother, with the Acura ARX-05 DPI program. You're not someone who sits well with missing targets and expectations. It wasn't terrible, but if you're not winning routinely, you're not going home feeling satisfied. Tell me about this past year, moving up from GTD with Acura, running the NSX GT3 and GTD. Tell me about moving back to prototype class type of racing you're super familiar with, very successful in. Have you been able to pinpoint some of the things about 2021 with this Acura prototype that didn't exactly live up to expectations, to pivot from that and get to 2022 and get back to a place you're more comfortable with and winning?
Yeah, admittedly, tough year. Totally don't run from that. Hate disappointing anybody, especially John Acada at Acura and HPD, for sure. Now we've had a couple, we have several really good years with Acura, so we have a little bit of credit build up. But the bottom line is that we have to produce every time we go out, and when we don't, we have a problem. So we know that. Now, specifically, our problems really stemmed from not totally being up to speed with the current DPI cars and the way the aerodynamics are and the ride control programs are. And I changed a lot since 2016, the last time we were in there with Ligier. And it's just expanded and gotten better and different and all kinds of things. Also, the way we race in prototype has changed a lot since we were there. So I break it down into two, the first part of the season was really rough for us. And it wasn't from a lack of trying. We had some organizational issues on our side that we needed to fix, which we have. We had just general knowledge of the car, not up to where it needed to be quick enough, which we've addressed. And things like that. We had some driving mistakes, which didn't help us, but you have that. That's normal, right? But not terribly, but we needed to catch up. More than anything, we needed to, number one, get organized on the MSR side. Number two, we needed to have a better understanding of what the car wants in all scenarios, street course, road course, whatever we had. Okay, bumpy, smooth, all that. And then third, implement a program going forward in 22 that makes more sense on all that I just mentioned. Now, from the second half of the season on, we actually had a pretty good race car, but unfortunately, for the most part, our bed was made with regards to the championship. So we were there to support the 10 car to try to help them win the championship. So we gave up on a lot of different strategies, and I question about our strategies, but a lot of it we couldn't talk about. We're there to help the other car when we're not going to get what we need for Acura. We're there to help them any way we can. So
but if you also look, Mike,
too, to try out.
I was just saying, if you look at the last race of the year, Petit Le Mans, you compare that to the opening race or two, drastic difference. So obviously didn't come home with a win at Petit, but boy, did y'all lead and show some strength as to how far the program had come along. So to that point, while the 10 car from Wing Taylor Racing was the one vying for the title, it's not as if you all were back of the pack fighting for nothing. You were capable of running up front as well. So it wasn't impressive. development from the start of the year to the end of the year.
No, that you know, that's what I say to you. I mean, I'm happy with our progression technically. I need to get which we've done now. I need to correct some organizational things, which we've done. And now we have a couple new drivers coming on board with Tom Bloomquist and Oliver Jarvis. And we look forward to that. And time will tell about where we stand with this all, but we think we're have a great pathway to have a good year this year and focus on not having just to be a support role, but be able to go for the championship ourselves. And, you know, we kind of look forward to this. The car is a tricky car. The Orca, you know, it's a tricky car to keep happy all the time. And it's just something that we basically needed to learn on our own.
Was telling your awesome head of PR, Matty Komar, that I am so impressed with what Shank has been doing in terms of who he is pursuing to drive his car. So I already mentioned the test with Nick DeVries. That blew a lot of people away. It really did, Mike. A lot of folks weren't thinking that laterally to go after him, at least to get testing with. The Ollie Jarvis signing, not just inspired, but proven. Rocket, rock star. The Tom Blomqvist one, I'm like, I wouldn't have never seen that one coming, but I love it. Tell us a little bit about the decision on this lineup, and also the fact, I guess, if you want, give some insights on, you're not just looking through this past season's top 10 in the Drivers' Championship and saying, which from these well-known names can I draw from? There's something inside you, Shank, where you're like, no. We're going off the page. We're looking to some places folks might not expect.
Well, we did a kind of a hybrid of that, you know, with Oliver. You know, there's a couple things that really, you know, his experience level across all bandwidths. He's driven, you know, obviously the Mazda for a few years. He's helped develop the Audi hybrid systems, which, you know, we're not talking about it a lot, but, you know, we got coming. So, you know, he's got experience with hybrid electric systems. He also has driven the Orca quite a bit in Europe. So he understands the Orca and its little, little things that make it tricky at times, and knows all of them North American tracks. So there's no learning needed. He knows every track. So that all check boxes. With Tom was, to me, the kind of right combination of all that. Knows the Orca, has been a factory driver, a bloody, like super quick guy, and has proven that, you know, he was on pole the first race at the last WEC race, and understands that we tested Tom also, and he was just lights out fast, you know. So I just think they tick box, and also, by the way, knows electricity, simulation, driver sim stuff really well. He's used to doing tons of that, and that's the way we're all headed. So these two guys tick the most amount of boxes. I don't have a lot of leash here, Marshall. I've got to get some results. And I felt this gave me the best opportunity to do that.
I love it. A couple more IMSA questions for you, then we're going to let you get back to your day. Year away from hybrid prototypes, Mike. LMDH coming in 2023. Acura said they're in. Audi, BMW, Porsche, Cadillac. We know that there's more manufacturers coming. Big stampede towards this hybrid prototype format. How do you think, what do you expect, at least this early stage, for Meyer Shank Racing to factor into Acura's development, getting ready for this new hybrid formula in 2023? And then the second aspect of that, knowing that IndyCar is also going hybrid in 23, how does that change things for you from a business standpoint? Are you able to talk to new potential sponsors, business sectors? Does the hybridization, electrification open up anything new for you as a team owner to enrich yourself, get new technical partners? Seems like could be a lot of opportunity for you here that's new.
Yeah, I think it's a whole new avenue that's just kind of showing itself right now. We have not dived down too far into it yet with regard to marketing the hybrid section of what we do, but it's coming. We're working on a lot of little things right now on the program for 23, for next year as we start getting ready for it. It's been, it's a whole new world for all of us. You know, it's not F1 level hybrid stuff, but it's a big step from where we're at today. And I think it's awesome. I'm hoping that the opportunity, like you talk about, to tie hybrid to technology and to what people are doing and the way our world's going today with clean energy and that type of thing, I hope it lends itself to the marketing side. We've been fortunate. We've had really, really good sponsorship sales for the next year or two. And that hybrid thing will just take it to a whole different, in my opinion, a whole different level. We look forward to it. And we're getting ready for a whole new era in sports car racing that we've never, you can talk about the days back when the Lowenbrow Porsche was there and, the Castrol Jags and all that. But I think this is on another planet when you look at the OEM involvement and what that could drive. It'll be interesting to see.
Wow. Two items to close, my friend. So for the first few years in IndyCar, you were pretty straightforward in telling me we're a sports car team, having to figure out this IndyCar thing. Tell me about where you're at today. Are you a fully vested, figured out, sorted, and understanding IndyCar team, completely independent from your sports car program? Do you feel like you've gotten all the way to where you needed to be in learning the open wheel side so that it's not so much of a blend between the two or having to pull resources from sports car? Curious where you're at there.
So you're right. And early on, there's a lot of cross-pollination of people just to make it all happen between the NSX program and the IndyCar program. But that's no longer. They're church and state now. There's only two of us, myself and one of my managers, Jason, that go to all the races. And Maddie does too, actually, our PR folks. But otherwise, it's church and state. They do their own programs. It's the way that we wanted to run the program. It doesn't mean they don't help each other when they need it in the shop or anything like that. But however, that said, they both have to be able to stand on their own leg as much as possible. We standardize as much as we can, eat cross growth brands, meaning we have the same kind of tractors and the same kind of trailers. And, we try to keep the pit boxes the same. And we're trying to make as much standard as we can just to make it easier on us. But from a people standpoint and from the ability to function on both sides without needing something from the other is 100% now. And that took 2 years to get to that point. Right. And to be fair, we're probably still getting there a little bit today even. But just because the people market is so tough right now, getting people to come and work. So we're set up to run two fully different teams. What we're ultimately set up for is to run 2 Indy cars and 2 prototype cars. Today we have 2 and 1. So there is an open door for another prototype car potentially. That's what we built the shop for. So we'll kind of see. That's kind of our max world right there, Marshall. For me, for me personally, I don't need to do any more than that from any standpoint, ego, money, anything like that. This is plenty to do at a high level.
We got a hashtag me personally. It almost closed the show, so I'm as happy. I'm as tickled as can be. Let's close on this, Mike. Tell us about how decades of sports car experience has helped get your IndyCar team to where it is today. What things from endurance racing in Grand Am, IMSA now for many years, would you say rubbed off or fast track things for your IndyCar team to get up and running? And are there any things that as you've learned more about IndyCar, you could say have come back to strengthen your IMSA program? You play in both places. And I love the fact that you have been very intent in trying to send whatever you can back and forth to make the overall team better. But curious that cross-pollination.
Well, let's be clear for one thing. I mean, on the IndyCar side doesn't exist without the sports car backbone to the business. Us winning and what Jim France did for our company early on during the Daytona prototype days and that series, allowing teams like ours to come in and compete for overall wins at the highest level at that time was it. That's the reason we're sitting here, period. Us winning the 2012 Rolex 24 was the first step in a series of events that led to where we're at today. So it legitimized us in many people's eyes, including OEMs, people with money, the sponsors that we have. Without that, we're not here where we're at today. With regards to specific car builds and endurance racing, it's all about how the car is built, right? It can take punishment for extended amount of times. I think that's something that has crossed over to our IndyCar program. The emphasis, and knock wood, we've had relatively good reliability on the IndyCar side. And then some of that comes from the sports car mentality on car builds, I think when you look the other way, the militant nature of IndyCar and how an IndyCar runs when it unloads from the trailer till it reloads at the end of the weekend, what I call a militant way they are maintained and run has helped the sports car side. Which, imagine the sports cars are a bunch of free loving hippies, right? And the IndyCar is a bunch of military, right? That marched like this, right? And we're kind of coming in the middle there a little bit. And but you stand back and you look at this, and you know what? I actually like the military way, and why I like the military way is because everybody knows exactly what the expectation is. And by the way, when that expectation is met, we go home. We don't sit and drink beer at the end of the day and sit around the track. We do our job at the highest level we possibly can, and we go on with our life. And that's kind of the IndyCar way that I'm actually trying to move more toward peace and love in sports car.
Look at that. We got hippies, we got military, we're learning all kinds of stuff, and we got your internet connection back, so you're not frozen. Shank, okay. You, your wife, Mary Beth, Jim Meyer, Rovazini, Swan, all the great folks you have working for you. So proud to see what you all have done. Honestly, if you all aren't an inspiration for everyone else and whatever they do in life, they're not paying attention. American dream type stuff happening, and you're one of us. I always tell folks, you are the realest team owner in motor racing. You're one of us who's done good. So with the remnants of my nasty Mickey's beer and your Busch Light there, I salute you and thank you for joining us to help the final day here of the Racer EPARTRADE Race Industry Week 2021.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. What an inspirational morning. We're just big fan of what you do. And you hire the French drivers. French drivers are good.
I do hire French drivers. Very true.
Mike, please stay with us a few more seconds as we're going to be transitioning to our next session. And okay. Marshall, what a great interview again. That was awesome. I mean, I enjoyed every second. And
I'm drinking beer at 7 a.m., Francis, just for you. And I hope folks believe I don't do this every morning, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell that lie.
The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
There are two types of people, racers and everyone else. Racer Magazine is for those who believe that racing is a way of life. Racer embodies the excellence that defines a sport driven by passion, courage, and ingenuity. Get 1 year of both Racer's print and digital edition for only $39 with instant access to our entire digital issue archive. Subscribe now at info.racer.com.